Hello everyone, welcome back to my second homeschooling 3D modeling lesson. In the first lesson, we have created one project. Now I'm coming back to the same project page by going to selfcare.com and clicking launch editor, or by directly going selfcare.com/app. When we get over here, you see we have the same option we had before to create a new project, but now we have the previous project. I've already done some work to show you what I'm going to model for today, and you see the image of what I've created. You have over here an option to rename it or to delete them. For now, I'm going to click on it to open this project. And I want to show you something that we didn't discuss before. I showed you before that everything you have over there plus some other settings you can do in workspace settings, which we said you can open from here, or you can open from workspace settings over here. But for now, I want to show you how you can actually rename the project. So because this is the second lesson, I'm going to make it Corona 2. And just to show you can rename it. And by the way, you should get familiar with these things over here. This is about saving. You can save, it tells you when it saves, or you can manually save. And this is messages over here, what is available, what not. So if you hover on something, it will tell you, for example, what this is doing. So if we have basic shapes, this tells you 3D shapes, and generate this, click to open settings and drag and drop. So you can see it tells you what you can do. And if you click on something that is not available, for example, Stitch and Scoop is not now available, the message tells you what this tool is about, but if you click on it, it gives you a message, please select at least 2 objects. So SolveKit is very good in showing you what's available and what not, and informing you what you can do. With that said, I'm going to hide this object and get it out of the way. And actually, before I hide them, I want to show you what the idea over here, unhide them. I want to show you what the challenges over here is. So if you look at this, it's a staircase that has whatever size we give it over here. We'll soon see how we measure size, but they have an equal amount of the same height between them, the same distance between over here, and the same height between them. And then over here it needs to have a very nice cut to have this. And the same thing over here, these are repetitive patterns. So when it comes to 3D modeling, and for that matter also any design, you're looking a lot for repetitive patterns and how you can save a lot of time. So imagine if I need to manually measure every step, its size and its height and so on. That would be quite tedious. So I'm going to show you now how you can automate and what the difference is between using absolute values or using delta values. And delta means a difference between. So for example, if this height is 25 and this height would be 50, then the absolute value from this height is 50, but the delta from this to this is only 25. And the same as if this would be 75, the delta would be only 25, even though the absolute value is 75. And when you model something like this, you want to play with deltas, which makes it much easier. One more thing before we start going is that I'm going to show the focus of this lesson is to start, as I said in the previous lesson, that it has a very nice flow. You first create objects and then the basic transformations. I'm going to focus on creating a basic shape and basic transformations. So if I need to use some other tools, I will kind of do it very briefly, not dwell on them explanations, because I will try to focus on what this lesson is about, and hopefully in future lessons I will have time to explain every tool in depth. So with that said, creating objects, as the message indicates over here on top, that you can drag and drop to create an object, or you can click on it. One more thing I have to say, that you see my screen, I'm going to use the measurements, that I actually went to my workspace settings and I changed the size of my screen to 2000, no longer 700. So you understand what's happening. And finally, I think one other message I have to see is to show what I said last time, that SolveKit will wouldn't allow you to go out of the workspace. So if you move this up, for example, it will go this way. If I move this outside, it will jump back. So this is kind of like controlling you where things could be placed. But this I will show in a second how actually I found a place where this is not exactly the same, and I'll explain what this is. I'm sure if they see this video, they'll correct that, but that's actually in our favor. It helps us understanding what I'm trying to do. So you see when I opened this already, it gave me what I tested before to make this project. So I'm going to go default values. I want to restore the default values to show you that's the default when you open it. And when you open this shape, and the same as with the other, they call it shape generators, you can use a slider, and if you move the slider, and look at this message. You reach the size limit. Okay, let's try it again. Read the message. It basically tells you that you reach a limit, use the text boxes, type in text box values. And this is something that's a limitation not necessarily for 3D modeling software. It's a limitation when using sliders and many other applications as well. The way sliders are programmed have limitations on units, and also limitation that it only whole values. You can see it jumps one value at a time. So if you want to make it, for example, 20.25, let's say I can type it in, but I cannot make a value a fraction. It will be real numbers. But the same thing is, because this is 200, I can type in, let's say, for example, 500, and this will allow me to type in. So in our case, I'm going to make this 300. I'm going to make the height is going to be this initial step size height. The height is going to be 25, and the depth is going to be 50. It's going to be the depth of my step. And I want to have enough space. I want to start it over here. So I'm going to move it. This is how you look at positions. So you see, we discussed last time how we have different orientation. For me, the Z direction is in this direction. So I need to move this towards the front would be positive. So I need to move it by 500 because my scene, actually 1000, my scene is 2000. What's 1000? Okay. So you can see if I'm going to put more than 1000, if I'm going to put, let's say, 2000, it actually makes it red, because it will go out of the scene, and if I hit enter, it will snap it to 1000. But this is actually something strange that, it's not strange, but it actually makes a lot of sense, that you see it allows me to go out half of the object. And the reason is because when you look at some position or something, it's always measured from a pivot. It's called a pivot location, or Selfcat calls it a gizmo location, which you'll see later in the tools. And in this case, they do not, the default gizmo location is in the center of the object, and they do not calculate that. So they allow me to go out because the position they measure is from the center. But once I finalize, you see I can click finalize. Once I finalize this actually jumps back. So they do calculate that. They're just not in this tool. And as I said, I'm sure they'll update it. Maybe the time you'll see it, it will be updated. So that's basically how you position the first object. Now, if I'm going to make a second object, let's first see. If I'm going to go a second object, I can do the same settings. First of all, you no longer see the first object. You have to make sure hide all objects are unchecked. And you can see now this other object. But if I want to make a second one, I will need to move it away, because we have the measure from the center. I'll need to move it away actually by not just 50, I need to move it away by 75. So I need to make it 925. So this is how it will be aligned right next to it, because you need to make 25 because it will be overlapping as you measure from the center. So you have half of this object and half of this object. So that's basically how I need to set it up. So this will be this. And then I'll need to make it, the height would be, let's say, 25 height instead of putting it on the floor. So you get the first step. But this step is not exactly what I will need, because it's missing this bottom piece. As you see over here, I also cut the piece. You see soon what I do, how I do it. But this is very bad because it's only connected one edge, and on later lessons we'll discuss how geometry should look like and why this is bad. But for now, you could just get the idea that if it's connected only one edge, this is kind of broken, this wouldn't work. So I need to make this bigger, but they don't have over here size, they have rotation. So I will need to go to position over here. I need to go to the scale, and then I can scale it down. I can scale it down using the gizmos and make it try to get the exact number, or I can just type in. What you see here is what I want to show is that there's something called symmetric and asymmetric. If I'm moving it now, you see it moves only in one direction. This is called asymmetric, so it moves only one direction. This is very helpful when you want to see what you're doing. You can actually change this behavior from here and make it symmetry. In this case, if I move it, you'll see it starts moving in both directions, top and bottom together at the same time. But if you use text boxes, it will always be, even if I turn this off, it will always be symmetric, because they don't know which direction you want to move, the top or the bottom. So if I make this 50, it will always be symmetric. And why do you need to know that? Because a lot of times you need to do both. You need to position something and you need to scale. So let's take, for example, if I'm going to make this, let's say, to 100, and this is the size that I want, and I'm going to position it onto the floor, which the y will be 0. Okay, now I know I need to scale this object. It's too big. I need this to be 50. So I'm going to type in 50 over here, and because it's asymmetric, it's symmetric in this case. It moves in both directions, which means it puts it on top. So the size of this object is good. The size is 50, but now the position is no longer good. It's 25 on top, so I need to move it back to 0. So you always try to save steps. So if you're going to use a symmetric scaling and you also have to do moving, you will first scale and then position move, so just to save some time. And it's just something to be considerate of. The other thing is that what I mentioned briefly about the idea where they measure from. So if you do move, this position is 0, because what are they measuring from? They're measuring from this bottom center. So let's take a look over here. That's the default, the origin. The origin is the bottom center. So I can change that. If I make this, I can choose from a drop down where it is, or manually position. Let's say I'm going to manually position from here, snap it to here. Look what I have now. The Y is 50, because that's the height, because from this location it's 50, and the Z is 925, basically the direction where you go from here, and as you can see over here also. So it basically changes everything. This doesn't change the position of the object, it's just what you use to measure. The same thing is with the scale and so on. And rotation, it's a little bit different. Once you're going to use rotation, you're going to have the option that it's kind of what you rotate around, and then it makes actually a difference how the tool is behaving. But nevertheless, for our case, the final thing I wanted to show you is that about the delta. So if I'm going to make this object, let's say I'm going to move this object back scale size. I'm going to move it back to 25, okay, and I'm going to position it back into the center, which, not in the center, I'm sorry, I'm going to position it back to 0 over here. I'm going to position it to 0, okay. So now the delta was a 25. Now I'm going to make it, let's say scale it. I'm going to scale it up symmetrically, asymmetric, so I'm going to try to be exact. Okay, 50. So I managed to do it with the gizmo exact 50. Okay, so now if I need to move this again, this is an absolute value. If I'm going to type in repeat last transformations, this will use the delta. And the delta would be my change now from 25 to 50 is only 25. So I click repeat, this makes it 75. Repeat again makes it 100. So if I'm going to make multiple copies of this object, there's a lot of different ways to make a copy. For now, we're going to use just drag and drop, hold control key into position to drop. You see this is not very easy in this case, so I can use the same idea, actually use the move tool. I can turn on my move tool and hold control key and position like this. So it makes it easier. So now if I have this object selected, I can go to scale and I can just go repeat, and I get it like this. And I can continue copying and do the same thing using delta based, but still this will take quite a long time to set it up. So I'll show you now a trick how we can actually do that. I'm going to go to the tool that it's called, let me select this. Once it's selected, in tools there's a tool that is called copy offset, which allows you to do macros. I already have here a macro, so I'm actually going to delete my macro. So I did it as a test, so I'm going to make a new one to show you. So if you think about what this is all about, delta based, and that's how you need to think about when using these. So if what I need to do the next, I'm going to make 15 steps. So that's what I used to my test before, the other image. So I'm going to use 15 steps. Now, if I need to make 15 steps, I need to move this. In this case, I do not need to consider half of the object because it's delta based, the amount that I'm moving by. So I need to move it in the Z direction by 50. That's what I know for sure, because the size of 50, I need to move it by 50. Then I need to move it in the Y direction. This is where it becomes interesting. So I need to move it in the Y direction. I need to move it by 12.5, not by 25. 25 will make it high. And I'll show you in a minute why. 12.5, okay? And actually, because I'm moving it in this direction, this is actually negative 50. Otherwise, it will give me the opposite results. This is negative 50. I'm moving it in the negative direction, 50, 12.5. I'm going to add another option now, which is size. The size, I'm going to scale it bigger by a delta of 25. Okay. Now, what's happening is because this is a symmetric scaling, so when I'm making it bigger, it means it moves it up by 12.5 and it moves it down by 12.5. So if I want this to be aligned with the floor with this, we already have it down 12.5 from the size. So I only need to move it the remaining 12.5. That's why it's important to understand how this is working. Symmetric and it's delta based. So now once I have this, I'm going to save this. A very good thing in 3D modeling always, and these things to save things that you have. You can reuse it, and you see very soon how I can reuse this. So I'm going to rename this macro to Corona 2. I'm using it in this lesson, and I click the save button. So I have this saved. Now I'm going to use simply copy. I make the 15 copies, and we already have here the basics that we have at start. We got this. By default, SelfKit selects everything they worked with, and you see it later in the program. This is a very, very helpful way for a lot of tools. But the initial product that didn't work, they consider worked with as these. So I have to take this one and save it. But before I do that, I want to actually measure if we got the results we expected. So instead of going now to the scale and look up every tool the size, I'm going to go to the measurement tool, and I'm going to randomly measure a few locations. I'm going to measure from here to here. And let's take a look. We got 25. Let's measure from here to here. We got 25. And from here to here, we already know this is 25. So we know this macro actually worked as expected. So I can exit my measurement, and I'll select this part as well. And now we're going to go stitch and scoop. In stitch and scoop, there are 4 options. For now, we're going to use a union that will combine these objects together. So now we do something like this, and we got the object combined. That's the basics. Now what I need to do, I'm going to make this rails. So we have a cylinder. First starting with a cylinder, so let's go to the basic shapes, a cylinder, and I'm going to reset the default. And actually, I'm not going to bother with the measurement now. I'll show the measurements on the tool itself. So I'm going to go over here. There's a tool. It's difficult to align. There's an option over here to align. I can align it, but in this particular location, it will be difficult to align. So I'm going to use the snap tool. I'm simply going to click here where to snap it to. But obviously, you see this is not perfect, so I'm going to scale it. And in scale, I can scale. Actually, I need to scale only in 2 directions. So I need to scale the Y, the height is okay. Actually, it'll make it even bigger. So I can make this, let's say I want to have this 25 the size. So I can scale this to 25. And by the, I'm sorry, this is something very important to know. Size is doubled in radius. So if I make 25, if you are in the tool, you would use 12.5 radius, because the radius is just half the size. So this is 25, is like a half a radius in this case. But then I need to reposition it again. Or I can also, you'll still have to reposition it, but I'll anyways have to make it bigger. So just to get you the idea, instead of checking these 2, I can undo this and uncheck. I can also go to over here to keep proportion. I use keep proportion, and now if I type in 25, it will actually resize in each of the directions 25. But again, I need to reposition it. So I'm going to position it over here, and I'm going to make it into this is another important thing to so first of all, you see I have an issue. This cannot go out, obviously it will block me. So the first thing I need to do just to make sure I have place to work with in case I need to. In this case I don't need, but just in general, I'm gonna uncheck this. I'm gonna check this box initially, and I'm gonna go to the move tool, and I'm going to center it, center object. So it actually puts it in the center. So now I know I have enough space to work with. It makes it much easier for me to do, to work with. And now we're gonna, again, I have the size. I can again snap this. I'm going to snap it to the direction, so to give me an idea, and then I'll adjust it. Okay, so over here, snapped over here. Okay, so if you look at the position over here, let's go to the position. This is like X is 134. Let's make it, I think 120 will work nicely. So let's say 120, no, 120 is, let's say 100. Oops, I have to make it the other way around. It's 80, I guess. What am I doing? 140, let's try to make it something that looks nicer over here. I can actually measure over here the distance. That would be the best way. So how about let's be exact. So if I'll be exact, I'll deselect this, and I'll select this, and I'm going to select this edge. So this will tell me, if I go to the move tool, let's close the copy offset for a second. I go to the move tool. This tells me that this is in the X direction is this 150. So if I want this to be kind of like, let's say, in a nice proportionate direction to this, let's say I want to make this 25, kind of like even to this distance. Okay, so there's a lot of things you think in design about proportion. I'm not an expert in proportion, but for now I'm going to use this, just kind of make this 25. So so this, I know this is 150, so in the X, so I'll need to make it 125. And then let's take a look while we're here. Let's take a look at the other direction, and oops, I'll turn this off. Let's take a look in this direction, this is in it's 400, so I'll do the same thing. I'll make it by 375. So it's going to be 375 over 125. So this would be, turn off the edge. So its position would be, oh, I have selected this as well. You see, it gives me the average direction. So I have only this direction. So this will be 125 over 375. Okay, that's what we said, I think so. And now the size, I'll need to make it a little bit higher. I need to scale it up. So I need to scale it up by, I want to make this height should be 300, but I'll need it to stick in a little bit. We'll focus on that a little bit later in other tutorials, but when it comes to Boolean operations, which Stitch and Scoop is called Boolean, they need to kind of go in. You can't have them, it's called flushed. You can't have them flushed like just on top of it. You need them to go in. So I'll need this to be going in a minimum of 5. So if this size is 25, so I'll get it in 5, so it will be kind of the Y direction would be, now it's flushed, you see, because I snapped it to it. So this is flushed, this is not good. So I need to put it in 5, but as I said before, if I'm going to scale it symmetrically, I'll need to reposition it. So it wouldn't be a good idea if I first position it, I first need to scale it. So I'm going to go to the scale, let's see, oh actually it's the height, okay, I made a mistake when I'm talking, I thought about the movement is actually not positioned correctly. Okay, never mind. I'll go to the scale over here, I'll make it 305, let's see if this the height is good. I think it's 205 I used before if I remember correctly, so I'll make it 200, 205, it's probably better, 205. Okay, and now the move, yes, okay, so now I'm going to position it. You see, these didn't change because I moved it only in the top direction, but this, I'm going to make it now 20. So I know it's a little bit going in, okay? So now we have this sticking out by 200. Now we're gonna go to the same tools, copy offset, and I'm going to use the same macro already created. So I save a lot of time figuring out again what's doing and just click copy. Okay, so now we get this selected. So I'm gonna select again the first one, and for now I'm going to merge the objects. In another video we'll discuss the difference between merging, grouping, and union. That's the topic for a different video. For now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to look again at this position, and this is positioned at 125. Okay, this is 125. So I need to make a copy and position it negative 125. So I'm going to use the same thing now. I'm going to hold down my control key and move it, and I'm actually going to position this negative 125. Okay, so now you get this nicely symmetrically aligned to this object, both of them, and I'm going to take this plus this, and I'm going to add Stitch and Scoop. I'm going to combine them together using union again. Okay, it actually works quite nice and fast. So this is combined. Now I'm going to make it this kind of cut, the angle over here. So in this case I need to see the geometry, how it looks like. So I'm going to go to my visualization panel, and I'm going to go to this option that I can see mesh plus wireframe. You can see we have a lot of details over here, which makes it difficult for me to modify. So Toget is an amazing tool, resolution, that you can add details and you can remove. In this case I want to make it to 0, so it will reduce these details. And look how beautiful this became. And why is this helpful? Because now I'm going to go to this edge and I'm going to move it. So I'm going to move this edge. You see, I have only a way to move it in this direction, X, Y, and Z, but I want to move it actually perpendicular this way. I'm not going to end up doing it this way, but I want to teach you the idea of local transformations. I'm going to show you the concept, but then I'll change it. If I change local transformation, now you see this becomes perpendicular to this. So now I can start moving this like this. But this has many problems. First of all, it's difficult to get it perfectly aligned. I mean, I think I got it straight, but still a little bit difficult. But second thing is, becomes the same issue I said in the beginning. These are very thin over here, only merged at an edge, and this will be broken geometry. It wouldn't work. So I can do it other ways. I can finalize this, then extrude. Some other tool we'll learn later, but this will give me issues over here. It will stick out. So I need to be a very nice cut. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to undo this, and I'll show you first there's another way that I can do it. Instead of moving it local transformations, moving it perpendicular, there's another tool that I can use, but also just to show you, but this is not going to help me. At the end, I'm not going to use it. I can use snap. One of the great advantages from Selfcut is that they reuse the same tools over and over. So we used already snap before to position an object. Now we're going to use it to position an edge. So if I'm going to snap this to this edge over here, you see we got this beautiful, I don't need even the moving tool, just snapping it. But again, I have the same issues. This is not what I expect because this will be broken geometry. And also it's not going to be strong. It can break over here. So again, I'll undo it and show you the final solution, what we're going to do. So what you're going to do is I'm going to go to a tool that is called Add Details next to Resolution. Add Details. And I'm going to go and select this edge and I'm going to move it down. But it's not just random. I know the exact measurements. So I type in 25 because I want this to be flushed with this, kind of like exactly like here. This will give it a very nice detail. And then I'll do the same idea over here and I'll move this down, but over here I'll type it in 50 so it's flushed with the width. So let's take a look how this looks. This looks like over here, difficult to see in the middle. Yes, you see this is amazingly nice cut over here and the other part is beautifully cut over here. So once I'm happy with the results, I click confirm. Now all I need to do is I need to select again this edge. And now we're going to go to the snap tool, and I'm sure you know the drill. I'm just going to snap to this, and now we got this beautiful detail that we got the cut. So this is over here, this is already done correctly, but there's still an issue. And again, not to go in exact details, but there's an issue that they have two edges over here that are combined, and this will create problems with the object as well. So I need to go to a tool that is called Remove Duplicates. This will remove the remaining details. It tells me a message over here that if you remove duplicates, the selection will be lost because I have an edge selected and it thinks I have it important for me to be selected, and it tells me it will be lost. So in my case, I don't care. I don't no longer need it selected. It said yes. So it tells me what it removed. You see, it gives me a message what it removed. And now I know I have a perfect object that it looks perfectly like this. Now in this case, I was lucky that the resolution tool helped me. You may have some cases where the resolution tool will not be able to help you if you have more complex objects, and you wouldn't be able to get such a nice geometry that you can then move it. How do you handle cases like this? So in order to do this, I'll hide this again for a second, and just to show you other ideas how you can do it. So I'm quickly going to go and create the same object again, and because I have my macro, this should be really fast. I'm going to go to the tools, to the copy offset, and I'm going to use my macro that we created over here, Corona macro, and we got this. Okay, so now let's take a look. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to combine this, stitch and scoop, and get the same idea that we're going to get some bad geometry. Okay, something like this. I'm going to center this on the screen. I'm going to use the move tool and click center. And I think for this I need to actually move it up a little bit so I have enough room. And you see this will take a lot more steps to make it work. But it's important that you know the other options that there is out there. So I'm going to take this object and I'm going to scale this object. I'm going to scale this, and it could be approximated, doesn't have to be the exact size, like this. And then I'm going to scale it in the other direction, something like this, okay. Oops. And now I'm going to use the edge on this object like this, and I'm going to move this up. So moving is sometimes the same idea as scaling, because in this case, okay, I need to move the entire object first up actually to align it to this. So let's actually see where this object is located. This object's height is located at 100, I think. The Y is 100, so this object is size is, let's see, scale is the object size is 100, yes. So I'm going to move the other object, select this object and deselect this, and move this to 100. Oops, I scaled it. I've wrong. Okay, over here, 375 to 100. Okay, something like this. And now we're going to go back, select this, and I'll click to deselect this. And now we're going to select this edge. You see, it takes a lot more work to do. And I'll need to move this up something like this. Okay, but I need to get it right, so I need to kind of let's say deselect this edge, select this object. Let me turn off the edge mode. Select this object instead of this, and let's move it up a little bit, so make sure it's giving me what I expect. And this is not perfect, you can see I need to play again, but for lack of time I'm not going to play with the exact measurements, just to show the idea. And now we're going to use another Boolean tool, stitch and scoop tool. In this case I will use the difference. So I'm going to choose the difference. This mesh is named mesh 14, which by the way we should rename it. Kind of we can rename things. But this is mesh 14, and I'm going to choose over here mesh 14, and I cut this out and I'll press OK. So now this is how we got it. But you see, this is not nearly as nice. I mean, I can certainly play around position and make it look nice, but yeah, it's definitely much easier the way I've done it before. So let's unhide this. And the last thing I'm left to do is to create this thing over here, and for that we'll use the rotation and teach rotation tool. So I'm going to finalize this. Let's say here we have the object. So rotation is kind of, I said before, it's rotating around the, kind of like a doorknob. It rotates around the hinges. So if I need to rotate this in this direction, I need to rotate them around the Y first, and that will be by 90 degree. And I want to show you something actually in rotation, that it could be positive or negative 90, or it could also be the opposite. So for example, if I say 90 degree, it could be, in this case around the Y, I think it's negative. So if we can make it negative 90, and that's actually correct. Or let's undo this, or it could be, think about 360 minus 90, okay? So that will be 270 degree, right? So I can make it positive 270, and that will give me the same results. So it's either or. It's either positive 270 or it's negative 90. That will give me the same results. Now I need this to be rotated, to be positioned over here. So I'm kind of gonna, it's not as easy to position it correctly. And this is where rotation makes also a difference around what it's rotating. So I'm now gonna rotate around the center because the video is quite long already, just to make it quick. But you can play around with maybe rotating around this edge would give it a better results. For now, the main idea is that when you rotate, you need to think about that you're not rotating around the gizmo. So if you see the gizmo, you may think you're rotating in this direction around the red gizmo, but that's not the case. Or if you have the green, you're rotating in this direction, like, which is almost impossible to select. But that's not the case. Once you select something, even the green gizmo, you rotate around the protractor. So the gizmo is just a hint which direction will be. And the same thing, you look over here, but the actual rotation, regardless of which axis you rotate, will always be around the protractor. So now I'm going to rotate around the protractor. I'm just gonna eyeball it a little bit, kind of like this, and this basically gives me this direction. It looks like it's good, but now I need to position this. I need to make it much bigger, and I need to move it up. So this is actually where it becomes a problem with the moving, the same idea, where if I move it, it will kind of be in this direction. Actually moving wasn't a problem, but if I need to move it now in this direction, it will start deforming it. If I start scaling it, actually, if I start scaling this, it will start deforming it because it's using the world axis, and I need to scale it locally. So if I'm selecting this face over here, now I can go to move tool, and in the move tool I have the local transformation, which will give it to me. I have the same thing in the scale, but in this direction, in this case, the move is better because you can't scale in this direction a 2D thing. You can only scale in this direction, make it bigger, or in this direction, make it bigger. You can't scale a single face, but you can move a single face. So I can move it up like here, okay? And now I can basically play with the move. Let's say deselect this. I'll select this edge, and I'll make it local transformations. And I'm going to move it up to make sure it sticks out like this. And I'll deselect, and I'll move it up, select this part, and local transformations, and a little bit adjust it over here. So I need to make sure exactly just it sticks in a little bit. And for the lack of time, I'm not going to play with exact positions of this, but now I realize that I have to move the entire object also like this. Okay. So now we should be fine. Again, you can play more with the exact measurements. For now, I'm going to make a copy. Let's just see where this is positioned on 127. So I can make it 125, kind of make it aligned. And let's make this y 210, or just leave it, not risking damaging it. And I'm going to hold down my control key to make the copy. And I'm just going to do the same thing, but negative 125. So now we know it's symmetrical. At least this is symmetrical. Now I have these. I'm selecting basically this object as well. So I have all three objects. And we're going to go again to the stitch and scoop. And we're going to make a union and confirm it. Okay. So now I can go in and do again resolution to reduce details. But for now, that should be as it is, should be fine. And what I'm going to do now is go to the material. So you get the same look we had before. Go to texture, and I'll choose a wood texture. I think this is what I used before, and I'll confirm it. And here you go. You have the same look at this nice cuts and nicely placed texture and so on. So this is about this. I hope in the next video to see you soon. We'll teach about the more advanced things. One last thing I want to say is that you can always use hotkeys as well. So move can use M. You see if you hover on it, it tells you the M. Besides the message it tells you over here, it also shows you the hotkeys, rotate and scale. And when it comes to these, it's usually a combination. So it's a D form would be D plus S because it's Q. So it makes it very easy to remember. Same modify would be M plus E for extrusion. So it's the name of the tool plus this. So the things that are exposed first would be just by itself. Things that is inside will be the name of this plus something, which is very helpful. And then we'll move on in the order, hopefully, and also going in the order of more advanced creations, drawing, and in the order of using more deformations and modify and explain everything. I hope you learned something, and let me know your thoughts in the comments, and see you next time. Bye.